For nearly 2 decades, a mathematical genius with delusions of single-handedly destroying industrial society planted or mailed powerful bombs to unsuspecting, innocent victims. It was a spree of mayhem that killed 3 and wounded over 24. In the largest and most expensive investigation in FBI history, agents spent 17 years hunting for the elusive terrorist known as the Unabomber.
The first bomb came in the spring of 1978. The damage it caused was minimal, but its impact would be enormous. With each new detonation, the bomber learned a little more about bombs, and law enforcement learned a little more about the man who sent them. Because its targets were universities and airlines, the FBI called him the Unabomber. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Before we ever knew the name Ted Kaczynski, we knew we were dealing with a disgruntled genius. We just didn't know how smart or how angry he truly was, or how far he'd go. But while the Unabomber was carefully perfecting his bombs, we were refining our profile. It was all a matter of who would finish first.
Hey, Terry, I got this pack.
On May 25th, 1978, an engineering professor named Buckley Christ at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, appeared in the mailroom with a shoebox-sized parcel. Professor Christ was listed as the return addressee, and he didn't know the man it was addressed to. Campus security guard Terry Marker cracked, "Maybe it's a bomb." As bombs go, it wasn't much of one. It began a 20-year streak of violence that would stump the FBI and terrorize the nation. On November 15th, 1979, American Airlines Flight 444 took off from Chicago, bound for Washington, D.C. As the Boeing 727 reached cruising altitude, the cabin filled with smoke. It was pandemonium. The plane was diverted to Dulles Airport in Virginia. A dozen people were treated for smoke inhalation. But for a faulty wire in the bomb, over 100 people would have been killed. Bombing an airliner is a federal offense. The FBI was called in. FBI agent Chris Ronay examined the evidence of the airline bomb.
It essentially was a wooden box that looked to be hand-fashioned, handmade. We found that it contained a barometric switch and some other initiating components, batteries, wires, and a container for the explosive charge. The barometric switch would function when the pressure changed in the baggage compartment sufficiently to close the switch or allow the barometric switch to function and then actually detonate the bomb.
The use of an altitude-sensitive barometric switch told the FBI that they were dealing with a serious and smart bomber. Ronay began his inquiries with the Chicago police. He was looking for anything to compare to the airline device. At Northwestern University, a thorough search uncovered the existence of 2 minor and seemingly unrelated incidents at the university. In addition to learning of the device that injured Terry Marker, Ronay learned of another. On May 9, 1979, another bomb had gone off at Northwestern University, seriously injuring graduate student John Harris. Its design was nearly identical to the first one. But since they were both relatively minor incidents, authorities at the time didn't connect the two. Dismissing those devices as amateurish pranks, the recovered debris was discarded. Working only from photographs, Chris Ronay concluded that all 3 bombs were the work of the same person.
There were construction techniques, the way the wood was cut, the way it was put together, the markings on the wood, the way the tape was applied, that is evident in the photographs, was the same as in the previous cases.
The pipe bombs, placed inside wooden boxes, were all made of ordinary components: screws and nails and smokeless powder and black tape. The components were homemade and sanded to render them untraceable.
Certain components were not crafted as much as fondled and played with and looked at, and you could see they were handled and shaped and reshaped. And it just struck me that somebody spent an awful lot of time on this bomb enjoying putting it together.
The FBI realized they were dealing with a serial bomber, one that was passionate about his craft. In the 1950s, a shy, highly intelligent boy from suburban Illinois named Ted Kaczynski skipped a grade in elementary school. He was an introvert, preferring to withdraw into his room to study, especially to study chemistry. He was a prodigy with genius-level intelligence. His IQ topped 170. He entered Harvard at 16 and graduated in 3 years in 1962. In 5 years, he had received his doctorate from the University of Michigan. As an assistant professor of mathematics at the University of California, Berkeley, Kaczynski was not a popular or outgoing professor. Practically no one got to know him. In 1969, he abruptly resigned. The social nature of his teaching position was too much for Ted. He just didn't seem to fit in. By 1971, Kaczynski had decided to drop out of society completely. He bought an acre and a half of land in a rural area just outside of Lincoln, Montana, 6,000 feet above the society he had come to despise. He built a tiny 8 by 10 foot cabin with no electricity or running water. There he would sit by himself, reading and writing. One of the things Ted wrote was a 23-page essay raging against modern man's obsession with technological and scientific progress. Scientific research, he wrote, will inevitably result in the extinction of individual liberty. He sent a copy to his brother David. David read it and stuck it in a trunk where it sat for a quarter of a century. In June of 1978, Ted Kaczynski took a time out from his cabin to take a job working for his brother at a foam cutting plant in Illinois. Ted's bizarre behavior became too much. His brother was forced to fire him.
Ted, take it down.
Ted had insulted a female co-worker who had refused his advances. Ted seethed and within a year moved back to his cabin in Montana, vowing never to see his family again. Trying to fit in as a social being was too frustrating for the introverted genius. Ted withdrew even more, believing modern man incapable of understanding him. He was starting to see civil society as an obstacle that needed to be overcome. In time, Ted became acclimated to his life with few luxuries. He took it upon himself to grow his own food and to be otherwise self-sufficient. He had few acquaintances, opting for his own company in the Montana wilds. Ted rarely made it into Lincoln. When he did, it was usually to bury his face in reference books in the small town library. On May 3, 1980, Ted Kaczynski rode his homemade bike into Lincoln. He wasn't going to the library this time. Instead, he caught a bus for Helena and checked into the Helena Park Hotel for a brief stay. The next day, he headed west. Ted had urgent business that needed tending to. Percy Wood, the president of United Airlines, received a parcel at his suburban Chicago home on June 10, 1980. A few days earlier, he received a letter from a stranger promising to mail him a book which, the letter said, had tremendous social significance. Wood placed the package on his kitchen counter. He opened and retrieved a book, Ice Brothers by Sloan Wilson. Wood was puzzled. Why is this book socially significant? He opened the cover. Wood was nearly killed. The bomber had upped the ante considerably with his fourth and most powerful device yet. FBI and ATF bomb technicians poured over the scene. It was quickly identified as the work of the serial bomber. Each bomb so far had been a pipe bomb with similar construction and wiring. On this, the fourth bomb, the bomber had left a calling card. Punched into a piece of rubble were the letters FC.
Certainly the initials FC were put in these bombs to be found, clearly protected in such a way that they would survive the blasts. It didn't make any sense to have it in there. It didn't function in any way. It served no purpose except to say, here's my signature, here's an identifying feature.
The FBI could only speculate what FC meant. By this time, FBI investigators had already given him a name. He bombed universities and airlines. They called him Unabomb, UN for university, and A for airline. Naming him was easy. Finding him would be much, much more difficult. In 1981, with FC their best clue yet, the FBI cross-referenced thousands of people with those initials. But the Unabomber was not sitting idle. In October, a package was found sitting in a building at the University of Utah. It was a pipe bomb. Fortunately, it was a dud. Investigators now had a device intact. Perhaps a component was traceable. It would take time to find out. The Unabomber remained busy. In the spring of 1982, a package meant for Professor Leroy Wood Berenson blew up instead in the hands of an academic assistant at Vanderbilt University. The bomb was made of the usual materials, with the initials FC on the surviving wreckage. Examiners spent endless hours studying every minute detail of the Unabomb devices. The most bizarre clue suddenly emerged. The last two people specifically targeted were named Wood.
Wood played such an important role in every one of the bombs. I mean, it was present in every one of the bombs, even when it didn't need to be. He, in fact, if he didn't have wood in it, he threw wood in it, sticks of wood, just so they'd be there. There were references to wood in addresses and names of people throughout.
FBI lab examiner Doug Diedrich of the Trace Evidence Unit is also a wood expert.
Well, the materials may indicate something about that individual, may indicate where he might live, what he might do for a living. And that's one of the things that I was involved with, especially in trying to determine where these types of woods came from, what geographical area, what part of the country.
This approach seemed like a long shot, but the scarcity of clues left investigators with few options. As the FBI investigation intensified, so did the power of the Unabomber's devices. On July 2nd, 1982, Professor Diogenes Angelakos of the University of California, Berkeley, a devoted husband and a popular teacher, noticed a strange-looking object on the floor of the Computer Science Department's coffee room. The explosion seriously wounded him and tore off his fingers. As he lay dazed, he found a typewritten note. "Woo, it works. I told you it would. RV." The FBI ran down everyone in America named Wu, and everyone with the initials RV, a monumental, labor-intensive task, but to no avail.
This is the problem, right?
The note was a ruse.
She's going to have to do it over again. It's going to take how long?
Another lead surfaced the day following the blast. A custodian who worked in Corey Hall, the building where the bomb exploded, saw a man with a thin mustache and sweatshirt loitering in the hall the night before. The custodian, however, was unable to remember enough details to help a sketch artist make a composite.
No bad.
Angelakos was critically wounded, requiring a lengthy hospital stay. He was no longer able to care for his invalid wife. She died within a month of the blast. In May of 1985, in that same building, Berkeley graduate student John Hauser, a captain in the Air Force, noticed on the floor a 3-ring binder sitting on top of another object. Hauser had just applied for astronaut training. What he didn't know as he lay wounded was that he had already been accepted into the program. But he would never fly again. His Air Force Academy ring was found embedded in the wall across the room. Ironically, Professor Angelakos was nearby when the bomb exploded. He rushed to help Hauser. Unabomber-related crime scene investigations conducted by the FBI, ATF, and the United States Postal Service had become frustratingly routine. The recovered bomb components were packaged and sent to the FBI lab for future comparisons. Over the next few years, there would be many such examinations. On May 8, 1985, a package was received at the Boeing Corporation in Auburn, Washington. It was addressed only to the company, was heavy, and had too much postage.
Hey, Mark, look at this.
A suspicious mailroom employee called security. The package was x-rayed and shown to contain a pipe bomb. It had FC stamped into the end caps. Had the employee opened the package, it most likely would have killed him and anyone else nearby. On November 15, 1985, Dr. James McConnell, a psychology professor at the University of Michigan, received a letter and package from a Ralph C. Kloppenberg. The sender described himself as a doctoral student. "I'd like you to read this book," he wrote. "Everyone in your position should read this book." As he read, his assistant opened the package nearby. The explosion seriously injured the assistant and blew out the hearing of Dr. McConnell. Examiners continued to dissect the bombs. They were evolving as the Unabomber refined his craft. Exhaustive lab tests showed they were getting more sophisticated and more powerful. Agents were frustrated. They were making little progress in determining the identity of the Unabomber. And their analysis was confirming what they already knew. If the packages kept coming, it would only be a matter of time before someone was killed. Hugh Scruton owned the Rentec computer store in Sacramento, California. On December 11th, 1985, about lunchtime, Scruton headed out the back door that led to the rear parking lot when he noticed something. It looked like a block of wood with 4 nails sticking out, points up. The explosion was ferocious, blowing a massive gaping hole into Scruton's chest, exposing his heart. The Unabomber was now a murderer. The bomb that killed Hugh Scruton was the most powerful yet. It consisted of a pipe within a pipe and contained all of the same characteristics as the others, right down to the FC stamped on a surviving end cap. The Unabomber investigation was now officially a homicide case. Investigators stuck to their strategy of keeping the details of the case secret, lest the Unabomber learn what they knew, or worse, lest they encourage copycats. Agents were desperate for a solid lead. Ted Kaczynski was always active in his secluded cabin. When he wasn't making bombs, he was writing his philosophy that justified them. For Ted Kaczynski, technological society was a horror, defined by the Earth's destruction and human beings amounting to little more than mindless robots. In Ted's story, anyone who was participating in the human race's dependency on technology was a villain. On February 20th, 1987, a secretary at Cam's computer store in Salt Lake City looked out of her office window and caught a glimpse of a man in the parking lot, placing an object on the ground. An hour later, the store's owner, Gary Wright, was in the parking lot. He noticed the object on the ground. It was a block of wood with 4 nails sticking out, points up. Wright received serious injuries, but miraculously survived. As police scoured bus stations and local businesses looking for a suspect, a sketch was commissioned from the secretary's description. It was unquestionably the portrait of a man in disguise. The sketch didn't catch the Unabomber, but in one way it may have worked. Knowing he was seen, the Unabomber seemed to vanish. After 9 years of bombings, Unabomber-related incidents simply stopped after the 1987 Cam's explosion. The investigation had continued, but all available leads had been exhausted. After 6 years of silence, investigators were hopeful that the Unabomber had either been imprisoned on some unrelated charge or died. Either way, the bombs had stopped. But Ted Kaczynski was neither dead nor in jail. He had spent the last 6 years virtually alone. Content in his day-to-day routine. Tending the garden, hunting, writing, and visiting the library, Ted always managed to stay on top of current events. In 1993, after a 6-year hiatus, several highly publicized events propelled the Unabomber out of retirement. The fiery siege at Waco, Texas, between the ATF and the Branch Davidian religious cult, and the bombing of the World Trade Center created a violent political environment. The Unabomber would return in a fit of violence of his own. Dr. Charles Epstein is a renowned geneticist at the University of San Francisco. On June 22, 1993, he sat down at his kitchen table to open his mail, including a padded envelope which had arrived that day. The blast critically injured Dr. Epstein. After 2.5 hours of surgery, he was stabilized and very lucky to be alive. Two days later, on June 24th, Dr. David Galernter, a prominent computer scientist at Yale University, arrived early at his office to open his mail from the previous day. Injured in his right arm, eye, and abdomen, Galernter struggled to his feet and went out the door for help. The FBI quickly determined that the Epstein bomb and the Galernter bomb were identical. Pipe bombs filled with potassium chlorate and aluminum powder. Both devices had been placed inside a handcrafted wooden box. A few hours after the Galernter bomb went off, a letter was received in the mailroom of the New York Times. It was from a self-proclaimed anarchist group called FC, who were claiming responsibility for the recent bombings. FC promised more communications in the future. An identifying number was provided to the Times to ensure the authenticity of future communications. It was 553-25-4394. The FBI determined that the number was a Social Security number of a 20-year-old parolee in Northern California, incredibly with a tattoo on his arm reading "Pure Wood." An investigation quickly dismissed him as the Unabomber. Another major clue was discovered. Impressed into the paper on the New York Times letter was the faint notation, "Call Nathan R., Wednesday, 7 p.m. The elusive Unabomber finally provided agents with a solid lead. The FBI talked to over 10,000 people whose first name was Nathan and whose last name began with R. The exhaustive search turned up nothing. It seemed the Unabomber loved sending the FBI on wild goose chases. The Times ran the letter, which sparked public interest. It also drew the FBI into dozens of false leads. Disgruntled students, aircraft engineers, even a Dungeons and Dragons club in Chicago. The latest round of activity had sent the FBI investigation into overdrive. A Unabomb task force consisting of FBI, ATF, and postal inspectors was formed to coordinate investigative efforts. Jim Freeman was the head of the FBI's San Francisco field office. He would also head the multi-agency Unabomb task force.
We had evidence that was scattered around 3 different federal agencies and a lot of local state laboratories. So we recognized that our task was to gain control of the information that was already out there, determine what investigation had already been done. And we set about this by deciding to reinvestigate every Unabomb crime.
Every shred of physical evidence that remained from past Unabomber devices would be given to one forensic examiner. Special Agent Tom Monell of the FBI Laboratories Materials and Devices Unit became the chief examiner for the investigation.
All the evidence in the Unabomb case, no matter if it was explosive related or not, came through me and my unit. In a serial bombing type case such as the Unabomb case, the most frustrating aspect was the fact that we were doing all forensic examinations that could possibly be done to the evidence, and it wasn't able to lead us to any individual.
While the task force struggled, Kaczynski's warped revolution against society continued. On December 10, 1994, advertising executive Thomas Moser was opening his mail in his North Caldwell, New Jersey home. His wife and 2 daughters were upstairs. He examined a small package with excessive postage from an H.C. Wickel, Department of Economics, San Francisco State University. The explosion was the most gruesome yet, instantly decapitating Thomas Moser. With every previous device in the Unabomber investigation, Agent Monell was able to reconstruct a replica, working only from the debris recovered from the various crime scenes.
Signature of the Unabomber.
As with the 15 bombs he had reconstructed, this one was unquestionably the work of the Unabomber. A few months later, Ted Kaczynski prepared for an extended visit to the West Coast. This trip would be his busiest to date. On April 19, 1995, Ted Kaczynski was in the San Francisco Bay Area when Timothy McVeigh's 2,000-pound fuel oil bomb destroyed the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people. Ted would not let his agenda be eclipsed by the devastation in Oklahoma. The next day, April 20th, the nation still reeling over Oklahoma City, Kaczynski mailed 5 items, 4 letters, and a parcel. Within a few days, the mail arrived back east. First was a letter to the New York Times. FBI Special Agent Terry Turchie was second in command of the Unabomb Task Force.
In the letter to the New York Times, he mentioned that he was claiming responsibility for the attacks on Thomas Moser, Charles Epstein, and David Galerter. He also mentioned some of his goals and objectives and said that he was thinking of sending a manuscript or essay and that he wanted them to consider publishing that essay. And if they did, he would make an agreement to cease committing terrorist acts.
The second letter received was to recent victim David Galerter at Yale, still recovering from his April wounding. The letter was taunting. Dr. Galerter, people with advanced degrees are not as smart as they think they are. If you'd had any brains, you would have realized that there are a lot of people out there who resent bitterly the way techno-nerds like you are changing the world. On April 25, 1995, a package arrived at the California Forestry Association addressed to its former president, William Dennison. Its current president, Gilbert Murray, decided to open it himself. It exploded with incredible violence, destroying everything in the office. Gil Murray was literally blown to pieces. 4 blocks away, the governor of California heard the blast from his office. The Unabomb scare was nationwide. Bomb threats were being reported everywhere. The FBI suspect list topped 50,000 names. 16 years and 16 bombs later, the Unabomber had claimed 3 lives and injured 24 people. 2 months after Murray was brutally killed, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. It read, "The terrorist group FC, called Unabomb by the FBI, is planning to blow up an airliner out of Los Angeles International Airport during the next 6 days."
The threat had to be taken absolutely seriously because the Unabomber had in fact placed a bomb aboard an aircraft before. It wasn't lethal enough to blow the plane out of the sky, but we knew that his bomb-making ability had progressed enough that he certainly was capable of that now.
The FBI saw to it that special security measures went into effect immediately at California airports. No one without a ticket was allowed through security. All bags were searched. Bomb-sniffing dogs checked everything. The Postal Service stopped flying the mail on commercial jets.
Passengers are questioned about carry-on luggage that they've had. Have you had this package in your custody and control during the entire time? Did you pack the suitcase yourself? Those type of questions all began from that day in LAX.
The same day that the airliner threat was received at the San Francisco Chronicle, the Washington Post received a message from FC, a 56-page typed manifesto. The New York Times received a carbon copy of the manifesto the next day, as did the adult magazine Penthouse 2 days after that. The letter to the Post and Times laid out the terms and conditions for publication and agreed to stop the bombings if the Post or the Times published. For Special Agent Terry Turchi and the Unabomber Task Force, receiving the manifesto was a huge break.
Of course, when the Unabomber manuscript came in, that was big information, and this was a major break, and we all knew that it was a major break, which if handled properly, could possibly lead us to identify the Unabomber.
The manuscript, blandly titled Industrial Society and Its Consequences, was a meticulously written tract against technology, genetics, leftism, conservatism, and modern society generally. The FBI had many items of evidence collected from years of investigating this case. They needed to generate just one solid lead, one that could hopefully break the case wide open. Freeman thought the answer lay in publishing the manifesto.
We very much were in favor of publishing it because after reading the manifesto, it was clear that someone had put their philosophy that had evolved over a number of years within the pages of this thing. It was recognizable. Somebody in reading this, we hoped, would read it and say, I remember that guy. He was sat next to me in class at such and such a university.
After some public soul searching and discussions with the director of the FBI and Attorney General Janet Reno, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, the decision was made to publish the manifesto. The manifesto appeared in a special section of the Post on September 19, 1995. By early 1996, Ted Kaczynski's brother David had been doing some soul searching of his own. The news reports that the Unabomber had connections to Chicago, their boyhood home, as well as to Berkeley and Salt Lake City, nagged at him. He got a copy of the manifesto and began reading. He read it in the hopes of erasing the idea that his brother was a killer. What he read sent chills down his spine. He recognized the language and content of the manifesto as being similar to that of writings by his brother Ted. David dug up as many old letters and writings of Ted's as he could find and compared them to the Unabomber Manifesto. Both had employed the unique phrase, cool-headed logician. David was distressed, but not yet convinced. He wrote Ted an urgent letter. Though he did not reveal his suspicions, he requested a visit to Montana. Ted refused his brother's request. David decided to call a private investigator to look into the matter, but the news that the private eye brought him was not encouraging. The private eye submitted the manifesto along with some of Ted's writing to be analyzed by experts who didn't know the parties involved. The experts concluded that the authors had a strong chance of being the same person. Frantically, David continued his search for anything Ted had ever written to him. In an old trunk, he came across the essay Ted had sent him back in 1971. David could no longer hide from the reality that his brother might be the Unabomber. David Kaczynski was stunned. The 1971 essay David had unearthed was eerily similar to the Unabomber Manifesto. Torn by the prospect of turning in his own brother on the one hand and endangering lives on the other, David Kaczynski made a gut-wrenching decision. Through his attorney, he contacted the FBI about his brother. In February of 1996, David Kaczynski told task force members of his suspicions. He gave a detailed accounting of Ted's life, where he grew up, where he went to school, and where he now lived. He then turned over the 1971 essay.
And then we were able to do a side-by-side comparison between that document that was prepared many years before to the current copy of the manifesto, and it was very clear to us, many of us in the task force, that the similarities were more than coincidental.
The FBI analyzed the essay and found over 160 examples of similarities with the Unabomber Manifesto, including common phrases and misspellings. The list went on and on. After 17 years, the FBI had its first major suspect, Ted Kaczynski. Dozens of FBI agents quietly slipped into the small town of Lincoln, Montana. The FBI kept careful surveillance on Kaczynski's cabin as they laid out the case for a search warrant, hoping that the Unabomber would not strike again in the interim. By the beginning of April, enough information had been uncovered to justify the warrant. Among other things, agents were able to learn that Ted had traveled extensively. Hotel records showed that he was always on the move immediately preceding a Unabomber event. Agent Terry Turchi submitted a meticulous 65-page affidavit outlining the government's case against Ted Kaczynski and requesting permission to search his cabin.
We had been working all morning, since about 5 that morning, to pre-position various agent teams in different locations in the woods in Lincoln, Montana, and at a forward command post that we had established in Lincoln. Everybody had a different role. We had also had the evidence response teams coming in, and they were staging at another command post that we had in Lincoln. So everyone was ready to go once the warrant was signed.
Disguised FBI agents and a forest officer approached Kaczynski's cabin. They walked toward his cabin speaking loudly. They didn't want Kaczynski to suspect there was anybody sneaking up on him. The officers asked him to help identify a property line on their map. As he turned to get his coat, the officers pounced on Kaczynski. The suspected Unabomber was in custody. Kaczynski was immediately taken for questioning to a temporary forward command post. Jim Freeman was about to come face to face with the man that had eluded the FBI for nearly 2 decades.
He looked just absolutely disheveled. He looked like he was covered with soot. The agents that had grabbed his arms to restrain him had soot on their hands.
So, Ted, you like to travel?
Kaczynski admitted nothing and refused to say whether the cabin had any live
How about
bombs in
Helena? You
it.
been down there much?
As the questioning continued, the search of the cabin began. The tiny cabin was treated essentially like a live bomb. It was assumed that the place at the very least had live bombs in it, or at worst, was heavily booby-trapped. Explosive ordnance disposal teams cautiously made their way into the cabin. Ted Kaczynski had not been formally arrested on any charges yet. As investigators searched through his cabin, they found enough evidence to charge him with possession of bomb-making materials. They found pipes, chemicals, wiring, batteries, and wooden boxes. This charge would allow agents to hold Kaczynski until a more thorough search could be conducted. FBI Special Agent and explosive expert Donald Sockleben was responsible for quickly gathering evidence in order to obtain the arrest warrant. He rushed to Helena to petition the judge. Sockleben had been working on the Unabomber case for years.
I think it was on the ride back to Helena that night when Pat Webb and I, who had worked on this for so many years, just sort of looked at each other and realized that maybe this was the beginning of the end. That we really did believe that night, if we hadn't believed before, that we had in fact caught the Unabomber.
Ted Kaczynski was detained overnight until formal arrest charges could be brought the following morning. He was led through the streets on national television, looking every bit the part of an eccentric hermit. He was presented the next day before a judge in Helena on a charge of possession of bomb-making equipment. The search of the cabin continued. The room was a gold mine, but a dangerous one. Each container, each book, each binder needed to be x-rayed for explosive devices. It was clearly going to take a long time to search the tiny cabin. The evidence being slowly hauled out of the cabin was damning. A series of 3-ring binders with page after page of detailed bomb designs which matched the bombs used in many of the Unabomber explosions. Explosive powders of the type used in the bombings. Aluminum ingots and aluminum shavings on the floor, crucial bomb components. There was the infamous hooded sweatshirt and sunglasses. Agent Thomas Monell, the expert on Unabomber devices, was also inside the cabin.
The other evidence located in the cabin were electrical components and wire that were consistent with the majority of the Unabomber devices. We found a improvised or a homemade flip-type switch that was literally identical to 3 switches that were used in earlier bombs.
After almost 2 full days, the search came to a sudden stop. A package was found. It was wrapped like previous bombs with a return address on it. All it awaited was a victim's name and address for the front. It was x-rayed and determined to be a live pipe bomb. Special Agent Sockleben had to handle the crisis.
Well, from the x-ray, it looked very similar to the last bomb that had been placed, the one that killed Mr. Murray in Sacramento. We were able to safely remove the box from the cabin and take it down the hill to where we set up a site to deal with the bomb.
The search slowly continued in the days ahead, and more damning evidence was seized. In addition to bomb-making paraphernalia and chemicals, agents also seized letters, notes, diagrams, and the Unabomber Manifesto. One irrefutable link between Ted Kaczynski and the Unabomber remained: the typewriter used for the manifesto.
The typewriter that had been used to type the manifesto wasn't found until literally the last day of the search, which took 4 or 5 days. It was literally in the bottom of the last box that was opened.
It had taken 11 days to search an 80-square-foot room, but the FBI's careful approach had paid off. The man who had killed, maimed, and ruined lives, all the while taunting the FBI, was caught stone cold. On April 14th, the entire cabin was hoisted onto a flatbed and hauled away for further examination. The charges against Kaczynski had been upgraded. On June 18, 1996, Ted Kaczynski was indicted in Sacramento on 10 counts relating to Unabomber activities. 1 charge in the death of Hugh Scruton, 3 charges in the wounding of Charles Epstein, 3 charges in the maiming of David Galerter, and 3 charges in the death of Gil Murray. That day would have been Gil Murray's 48th birthday. New Jersey authorities filed more charges for the death of Thomas Moser. On November 12, 1996, selected visitors filed into a Sacramento courtroom for the long-awaited trial of Ted Kaczynski. In the front row was Ted's family, brother David, and his mother, Wanda Kaczynski. As Ted entered the courtroom, he turned his back angrily on his family members and never acknowledged them. Opening statements were about to begin when Kaczynski stood up and said he wanted to change lawyers. After a few days, the judge ruled that Kaczynski would have to undergo psychological testing. Federal prison psychiatrist Dr. Sally Johnson spent many days with Kaczynski. She concluded that Ted Kaczynski was mentally ill, but was competent to stand trial. The government's case against Kaczynski was overwhelming. For 17 years, the FBI had prepared for this day. examiners had reconstructed and preserved every device related to the Unabomber's crimes. With Ted Kaczynski's arrest, they were now able to establish an irrefutable link between him and the Unabomber. Ted's desire for solitude would no longer be self-imposed. With no options, he pled guilty to all Unabomber-related crimes. He was given 4 life sentences plus 30 years. He would never be eligible for parole. For Agent Terry Turchi, the Unabomber investigation shows the FBI's determination to never quit until justice is served, no matter how long it takes.
For the people committing these crimes, who may go on for many years and not get caught, they may become more arrogant, or they may become more complacent, or they may think we're never going to catch them. But I think for them and for the public, the message has to be that we don't give up and that we're going to stay with it until we solve it. And certainly I think that is what we're called upon to do and what we need to do.
In June 1998, Joanna Lee, an assistant editor at Simon & Schuster Publishing, received a letter from Ted Kaczynski with a prison return address. She knew he was the convicted Unabomber, but opened it anyway. Kaczynski wanted them to publish a book about his struggle. To this date, there are no takers. In Beirut, armed extremists seize a plane to make a political statement. They terrorize the crew and passengers, including 2 U.S. citizens. As attacks increase against Americans abroad, the FBI and the CIA undertake a daring operation to arrest a hijacker and to send a powerful message to terrorists everywhere.
In the 1980s, the United States faced a deadly new enemy abroad, an expanding network of terrorists targeting American interests. Hundreds of innocent people were killed in bombings, executions, and hijackings. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the violence escalated, the U.S. government responded with new laws that gave the FBI broader powers to go after these radical extremists. This is the story of one of the FBI's first cases in the war on terrorism, a war that started long before September 11th.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
Thank you.
14. Enjoy your flight.
June 11th, 1985.
You're in seat 12A. Hi there.
66 passengers, including an American university professor and his son, board Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402 from Beirut, Lebanon to Amman, Jordan. A gang of heavily armed terrorists overpowers the passengers and crew. They force flight attendants to identify undercover sky marshals to prevent them from intervening. The lead hijacker forces his way into the cockpit and orders the crew to take off. Once in the air, he demands that the captain fly to Tunis. The captain does not speak Arabic. His co-pilot translates. The hijacker wants to force a meeting with the Lebanese ambassador and the chairman of the Arab League, Chadley Khalibi. The goal, to make demands, including the removal of 20,000 Palestinians from Lebanon. As the plane flies toward Tunis, The terrorists beat and torture the sky marshals. They appear to have complete control until the aircraft finally enters Tunisian airspace. Former member of the FBI's International Terrorism Squad, Special Agent Tom Hansen.
They were denied landing authority, and in fact, the Tunisian authorities blocked the runways with fuel and water trucks. The main hijacker had conversations over the aircraft radio with the tower. This went back and forth for an extended period of time, and he was simply unable to break the Tunisian will to allow the aircraft to land.
Unable to force a meeting with Arab League Chairman Chadli Kalibi, the hijacker reads his statement to the control tower. The aircraft continues to circle the Tunis airport, becoming dangerously low on fuel. The pilot convinces the lead hijacker that to avoid crashing, they must fly to Palermo, Italy to refuel.
We're dangerously low on fuel. We're going to land in Palermo.
Flight 402 approaches the Italian airport, but the captain cannot land. The runways there are also blocked. He informs the air traffic control that they must either allow the plane to land or clean up the wreckage. The tower finally complies.
Okay.
Once they are on the ground, the hijackers demand that the plane be refueled. Airport authorities at Palermo refuse. The Italians stall for time with a simple deception.
They notified the flight deck that they had notified the Arab League and that they were making all attempts and felt confident that they could get Chadli Kalibi to travel from Tunis to Palermo to meet with the hijackers.
The hijacker is suspicious. Why would Chadli Kalibi travel to Palermo when he refused to meet him at Tunis airport? After an hour of waiting, the hijacker tells the tower that he will throw 2 children from the plane if airport authorities do not send out a refueling truck.
Okay.
10 minutes later, Flight 402 is refueled and heading back to Tunis. For the second time in one day, the plane circles above Tunis International Airport. The captain tells the tower that the hijacker wants to read his statement on Tunisian radio, a state-run network. The air traffic controller responds that they cannot patch him through. They don't have the equipment.
Listen, he doesn't even speak English, okay?
To appease the hijacker, the captain lies to him and tells him the tower has agreed to broadcast his statement. Flight 402 returns to Beirut International Airport. Another terrorist boards the plane. He orders a few children and elderly passengers to leave. He relays a message from a superior, instructing the lead hijacker to fly over Jordan and Syria to read their proclamation. The plane again takes off. But after spending more than 24 hours in the air, the lead hijacker decides to turn back.
He did not feel that they were getting a bang for their buck, so to speak. So the aircraft never went to Jordan and never went to Syria.
The aircraft circles Lebanon for several hours before finally landing in Beirut. Determined to get their message across, the hijackers rigged the nose of the aircraft with plastic explosives. At 9 a.m., the lead hijacker calls the tower. He vows that if 20,000 Palestinian refugees are not expelled from Lebanon by 2 o'clock that afternoon, he will kill the remaining hostages. In Beirut, gunmen rigged the cockpit of a hijacked plane with explosives. Aboard are 66 passengers, including 2 United States citizens and 9 crew members. The hijackers tell the tower that they will kill all the hostages if the government does not expel more than 20,000 Palestinians from Lebanon by 2 p.m. FBI Special Agent Tom Hansen.
Without any real notice, the passengers were ordered off the aircraft and instructed to enter into the terminal building.
Inexplicably, their 30-hour nightmare is over. The hijackers place hand grenades around the cabin. With the aircraft emptied and in the presence of international media, the hostage takers deliver one more emphatic statement. U.S. federal law enforcement agencies are determined to catch the hijackers. For the FBI, it is an historic moment. For the first time, they can legally pursue terrorists who have attacked Americans overseas, a power they had only recently acquired. In the early 1980s, Lebanon was a country ravaged by civil war. With the central government in shambles, Christian and Muslim militias clash, fighting for control. Beirut, once considered the Paris of the Middle East, is reduced to rubble. The situation further deteriorates, eventually forcing the U.S. Marines to deploy to Lebanon as part of a multinational peacekeeping force. The violence only escalates. In October of 1983, a suicide bomber detonates a truck full of explosives at the Marine barracks at Beirut International Airport. The blast kills 241 U.S. servicemen. 3 seconds later, a similar bomb destroys the French Army barracks, killing 58. The bombing at the Marine barracks is the single deadliest attack on Americans overseas. Former FBI Assistant Director of the Criminal Investigation Division, Oliver Buck Revell.
The horrendous attack upon the Marine barracks in '83, for a short time, really focused the attention of the American public on terrorism, but it always wandered off very quickly because there was not a belief of there being a sustained level of attack against the United States.
Many Americans are unaware that several radical Shiite Muslim groups have declared a low-intensity war on the U.S. Their goal, to drive Westerners out of Lebanon. The most notorious of these groups is Hezbollah, whom U.S. intelligence agencies suspect is behind the Marine barracks bombing. The following year, terrorism continues to plague the region. Diplomacy has failed. Peacekeeping forces have proven ineffective. And the FBI only has the legal authority to monitor international terrorism. Special Agent Tom Hansen.
We had no real jurisdiction to operate overseas or to prosecute those who committed acts outside the borders of the continental United States.
To give U.S. authorities broader international powers, Congress enacts the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. This new law allows the FBI to apply existing kidnapping and air piracy laws to crimes committed against American citizens overseas.
So from that point on, any terrorist group who took an American hostage anywhere in the world, including aircraft hijackings, became the subject of an FBI investigation. The hijacking of the Royal Jordanian flight violated the anti-hostage-taking statute that had been passed in 1984, for the very first time, and it involved the FBI then initiating an investigation. Even though the plane had never been in the United States and it was not a U.S. carrier, there were Americans on board. They were held hostage, and therefore the statute was violated.
Tom Hansen becomes the lead agent on the case.
The actual investigation regarding the hijacking of Royal Jordanian 402 started off as a basic intelligence effort to gather as much information as possible.
The FBI knows the two most active terrorist groups in Beirut are Hezbollah and the Amal militia, another Shia faction formed during the Civil War.
Here's the plane.
They suspect it is the Amal militia who is responsible for the hijacking.
Here's everybody loading.
They control security at the Beirut airport, giving them access to the plane. Also, the hijackers' anti-Palestinian statements are typical of the group. Former FBI Executive Assistant Director Buck Revell.
There was a dichotomy between the Hezbollah and the Amal, in that the Amal wanted to remove the Palestinians from the south of Lebanon to send them back into Israel or elsewhere, whereas Hezbollah was supportive of the Palestinian movement, particularly the PLO.
Both groups use extreme measures to get their message across. 3 days after the hijacking of Flight 402, 4 Hezbollah gunmen hijacked TWA Flight 847 in Athens and forced the pilot to fly to Beirut.
This was primarily an American flight. There were over 140 passengers on board, many of them American citizens.
The Hezbollah made a number of demands in conjunction with this aircraft hijacking, specifically for the release of certain Hezbollah Shia prisoners, as well as certain Palestinian prisoners. Demands which, of course, the United States had no control over, and of course it was against U.S. policy to make concessions to terrorist organizations.
The hijackers forced the TWA jet to fly back and forth between Beirut and Algiers. At each stop, they release women and children. In Beirut, the terrorists decide to prove they are serious about their demands. They kill U.S. Navy diver Robert Steedham.
They executed him in cold blood, threw him out on the tarmac there at Beirut International Airport, which of course enraged all of us and caused us to rededicate ourselves that this wouldn't stand. We would go after these people as long as it took.
39 hostages remain, all Americans. The hijackers move them off the plane and hold them at several locations around Beirut. President Ronald Reagan reacts.
Terrorists, be on notice. We will fight back against you in Lebanon and elsewhere. We will fight back against your cowardly attacks on American citizens and property.
Authorities consider possible diplomatic strategies.
There were continuous meetings in the sit room at the White House. We were trying to come up with some basis to effect the release of the hostages. This was probably the most stressful circumstance during my 12 years in charge of the terrorism program. We were using every intelligence means available to us. CIA assets, technical means, intelligence from allied services, through diplomatic channels. It was an all-out effort to obtain any and all information about who was holding the hostages, where they were being held, under what circumstances, and of course any information that would allow us to locate and potentially rescue the hostages.
As U.S. agencies gather intelligence, 39 American lives hang in the balance. June 1985. Hezbollah gunmen hijacked TWA Flight 847 in Athens and forced the pilot to fly to Lebanon. They hold 39 passengers hostage all over Beirut. The U.S. Department of State applies diplomatic pressure, trying to secure the release of the hostages. Former FBI Executive Assistant Director Buck Revell.
We were putting pressure on the Syrians, pressure on the existing Lebanese government. We were using surrogates such as Egypt and Jordan. So it was really an all-out effort to use any and everyone that might have some ability to try and bring pressure on the Hezbollah to release the prisoners.
Finally, President Hafez al-Assad of Syria offers to negotiate with the captors and convinces them to release all 39 hostages. President Ronald Reagan gives voice to the nation's collective sense of relief.
The 39 Americans held hostage for 17 days by terrorists in Lebanon are free, safe, and at this moment on their way to Frankfurt, Germany. They'll be home again soon. This is a moment of joy for them, for their loved ones, and for our nation.
With the hostages safe, U.S. authorities turn their attention to finding the hijackers. FBI agents debrief the hostages of TWA Flight 847. Special Agent Tom Hansen.
Many of the passengers were shown photo spreads of previous suspects in hijackings, kidnappings, to determine whether or not any of these individuals were involved in the TWA incident. Many of the passengers identified the photo that we had of the main hijacker from the Royal Jordanian aircraft.
Hansen learns that the lead hijacker of Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402, a member of the Amal militia, guarded hostages from the TWA hijacking.
They gave accounts of conversations with this individual who admitted that he was one of the Royal Jordanian hijackers and asked them if they had seen the aircraft and basically bragged about his role in that incident.
Investigators have identified a prosecutable subject. But gathering information on a Beirut-based terrorist is difficult at best. At the time, a boundary called the Green Line divides Beirut into the Christian East and the Muslim West. Dwayne Dewey Claridge is a former division chief in the Central Intelligence Agency's Directorate of Operations.
West Beirut was no man's land for Americans, or even for many Lebanese. And therefore, collecting information was extremely difficult, not only for CIA, but also for the friendly Lebanese intelligence services.
But the CIA is relentless. Embedded operatives in Beirut continue interviewing informants. Their persistence pays off. They learn where the Royal Jordanian air hijacking suspect lives. The only problem, U.S. authorities are powerless to go after him.
It just wasn't possible to coordinate with the Lebanese authorities to hand over the main subject. There was no specific government really in control.
Terrorism continues to spread throughout the world. In 1985 alone, there are 812 incidents of international terrorism. 926 people are killed, including 23 Americans.
We had so many acts of terrorism committed against U.S. citizens abroad that the president convened a task force, the Vice President's Task Force on Combating Terrorism, brought in cabinet-level people to examine the law, the policy, and the actions of the United States to best combat terrorism and to define the roles of the various agencies so that it was very clear. And they set up means for interagency coordination.
In January 1986, the task force creates the Operations Subgroup, or OSG.
I'd like to be meeting you somewhere else under different circumstances, but terrorism.
This interagency panel is comprised of officials from the FBI, the CIA, the National Security Agency, the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, and the State Department. Buck Revell represents the FBI.
The OSG had two responsibilities. One, to ensure that appropriate intelligence was disseminated on a full basis. Secondly, to coordinate operations against terrorist targets, whether they be groups or organizations or even terrorist-sponsoring nations.
Representing the CIA on the OSG is Dewey Claridge. Even before the creation of the OSG, Claridge had made recommendations for improving the CIA's counterterrorism operations.
We had to do something very different because terrorism is a transnational phenomenon. What I mean by that is that an operation may be planned by a group in Syria but carried out in Rome. Now, the U.S. government, like all governments, is organized on geographic lines, no matter what agency you're talking about. And it inhibits really getting after the terrorists. To handle that, you would create a center where the center would operate across national boundaries or across the divisional boundaries of CIA. The solution, at least for CIA, was to create the Counterterrorism Center to deal with a transnational problem, both in terms of geography and bureaucratic turf.
The CTC unites operatives from each of the agency's divisions, enabling them to pool intelligence. Dewey Claridge is named chief of the center.
It was a revolution. Never before had CIA ever organized across geographic boundaries or bureaucratic geographic boundaries on anything.
This afternoon,
The U.S. is now in a position to take action against the terrorist threat, and the OSG is at the center of the effort.
We were looking for a target which would do several things for us. One, we wanted to demonstrate to the terrorists in the Middle East that we had the will and the capability of going after them anywhere at any time. Second, we wanted to demonstrate the effectiveness of the new law and to have it tested in the courts. So we were looking for proactive opportunities to essentially put on notice that the United States was not going to be dormant. It was going to be proactive in addressing these problems.
Members of the OSG sift through intelligence on several wanted terrorists, including the hijackers of Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402 and TWA Flight 847. The problem is, none of the potential targets are accessible.
that's kind of a tough place to get into, but I assure you that
For now, all the CIA and the FBI can do is gather information on the wanted terrorists and work to get indictments. Special Agent Tom Hansen.
As most investigations go, there has to be an element of luck, and ours came in June of 1987.
The OSG learns that the Drug Enforcement Agency already has a Lebanese informant working out of Cyprus. Because of his associations, they believe he could help them locate wanted terrorists. In debriefing him, a CA operative learns the informant knows the lead hijacker of Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402. U.S. authorities may finally have the means to capture him. In the 1980s, with the growing threat of violence against Americans abroad, the U.S. government makes international terrorism a top priority. In 1986, the Operations Subgroup, or OSG, learns that a DEA informant knows the lead hijacker of Royal Jordanian Air Flight 402. FBI Special Agent Tom Hansen.
Not only did he know the main hijacker, but they had shared a friendship and an association over a period of approximately 4 years. In fact, indicated that he felt that he could get this person to travel outside of Lebanon and visit him in another country. And this gave us one thing that we hadn't had in the past, and that was accessibility.
Former chief of the CIA's Counterterrorist Center and OSG member Dewey Claridge.
By getting our hands on him and bringing him back to the States and put him on trial, we would be signaling to the terrorists for the first time that we had changed our method of operation and we were on the offensive.
The informant is cooperating, but he has a few concerns. Former FBI Executive Assistant Buck Revell.
He wanted a significant reward and relocation of himself and his family to the United States under the Witness Protection Program. We felt in the interagency negotiations that this was a reasonable request. He certainly would be at risk if he and his family stayed in Lebanon, so we obtained authority to do that.
In Cyprus, the informant tells a CIA operative that the hijacker has left the Amal militia.
The hijacker, in fact, got into the drug business. He pursued this in Europe and other parts of the Mediterranean, so was somewhat actively involved in transportation and sale of narcotics.
He told us that the lead hijacker was interested in doing drug deals, that he had been involved in the past in certain drug operations, and he thought that he could be enticed to leave Lebanon, which was an important issue, and go to Cyprus or elsewhere where he would be vulnerable for arrest on our charges.
The OSG now believes the Royal Jordanian air hijacker is within reach. With the informant's cooperation, the CIA plants listening devices in his home to record his conversations with the hijacker.
The determination was for him to go back and say, I know of a major international drug dealer who is looking to do an operation. You could bring the drugs in through Iran into Lebanon and then set up an operation to supply this drug dealer, and it would be very lucrative.
The plan calls for the informant to set up a meeting outside Lebanon between the hijacker and an imaginary drug dealer named Joseph. The OSG decides the meeting will take place on a yacht in international waters.
We did not want any operation that we undertook to involve violations of the sovereignty of another nation.
The OSG considers whether the U.S. military or the FBI should make the arrest.
Good news for you. She just handed me a memo.
Former commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team, Special Agent David Woody Johnson.
The basic plan was that any counterterrorism operation occurred outside the United States or its territories would be handled by the military. Anything that occurred inside the United States or its territories, HRT would handle. And so now we got a situation where we may want to go over and grab a guy overseas. Do you use the military teams or do you use HRT? And that had to have been debated at the Attorney General, Department of Defense level. And they finally described it as an arrest. So we're going to use the hostage rescue team in spite of the fact that we're going to do it overseas.
They choose the HRT because the FBI has arrest powers and the military does not. Members of the HRT are law enforcement officers trained to do hostage rescue and testify in a U.S. court of law.
The idea was to try to take him alive and bring him back here and prosecute him. So I think the idea was to make a bigger political statement.
We wanted to make sure that the terrorist groups and organizations, particularly terrorist sponsoring nations, knew that the United States had both legal authority and the will to carry out whatever operations were necessary. And we knew that it had to be done with interagency cooperation. This operation took a very long time to plan. We didn't want to violate the sovereignty of another nation. We did not want to undertake this and not succeed. That would send exactly the wrong message.
The plan is ready to implement. The final hurdle is obtaining the president's approval.
As I was going to Washington National Airport to catch a commercial flight under just a regular passport to Athens, I received a telephone call in the Bureau vehicle from Ed Meese, the Attorney General. And he advised me, he said, Buck, I just briefed President Reagan. It's a go. Good luck, and I'll talk to you on the other end.
Okay, I'll keep you posted.
Before launching the mission, the FBI solidifies their case.
We had to recontact the witnesses that we had previously interviewed and determine whether or not we could get a commitment from them that they would come to the United States and testify.
Several passengers and crew of Flight 402 agree to take the stand if necessary. The government now has a prosecutable case. The plan, dubbed Operation Goldenrod, is set into motion. In the mid-1980s, the U.S. Congress acts to give federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies broader powers to battle the growing threat of international terrorism. September 1987. Operation Goldenrod is a go. The FBI, the CIA, and the U.S. Navy deploy assets for the arrest of the Royal Jordanian air hijacker. The FBI coordinates their portion of the operation from a command center aboard the USS Beirut, positioned in international waters 15 miles off the coast of Cyprus. Special Agent Woody Johnson is the commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team.
The crew was told that they were just waiting for technical support to come out on the ship to help them correct some problems. We came off carrying gun cases and other things, and we have some pretty big agents, and they don't look like normal technicians, and those don't look like normal, technical boxes. I remember having one of these young sailors say something the other way by. I said, "Technicians, right?"
In Greece, HRT member Special Agent Don Glasser rents the yacht where the arrest will take place.
Boat was chosen because it would blend in. It wouldn't attract any attention. We made some changes to it. We actually put a satellite navigation system in and making some adjustments to that, and actually put a Loran on it. And it's a electronic navigation equipment.
In the port town of Limassol, Cyprus, Dewey Claridge and the CIA team set up a command post in a hotel room.
We had a communications officer with us and a lot of aluminum trunks of equipment, which were passed off as photographic gear. And we had satellite communications back to Washington, to EUCOM at Stuttgart, that's the U.S. military command at Stuttgart. And of course we had communications with the Butte, with the yacht, and headquarters was patching our communications through to the FBI headquarters, the White House, and whoever else. Everybody wanted to be in on this, know what was going on.
Under sail off the coast of Greece, the FBI arrest team alters the appearance of the yacht to protect the owner's identity.
We changed the flag from a Grecian flag to Italian flag. We've changed the home port and the name on the hull, and we turned the life preservers all around, which had the name of the boat on it.
Former FBI Executive Assistant Director Buck Revell oversees the Bureau's command center on the USS Butte.
We had an emergency response team. We had a helicopter turning up on the deck, on the aft deck, ready to immediately respond with automatic weapons and other capabilities to defend against any attempt by pirates or terrorist groups to intercede in the operation. Our concerns over the actual execution were that we could get him to the location in international waters to execute the arrest, but also that we could secure that arrest and that we could keep it from becoming an international incident. In these type circumstances, you never know exactly what you're going to be faced with. We were dealing with a very fluid situation in Lebanon. We had to have the CIA operations in place in Cyprus. We had to have the FBI operations in place on board the yacht, which was the intercept vessel, and our command and control and emergency response on board the USS Butte, which was going to have to stay in international waters but be very close by. And since we couldn't control the exact timetable, it had to be very flexible.
The FBI and the CIA are ready. CIA operatives tell the informant to call the hijacker in Beirut and tell him everything is in place. He needs to come to Cyprus now to meet the fictitious drug dealer, Joseph.
The hijacker bought into this idea of coming to Cyprus to meet Joseph, who we basically manufactured as a big drug person. Hijacking aircraft doesn't really make you much money, if any. But and so he was looking to make some money.
The hijacker arrives at the informant's home, where he will stay until the operation begins.
We made sure that not only did he throw money around quite lavishly when he brought the hijacker over to Cyprus, but he had showed him a suitcase full of money that certainly impressed the hijacker. He got the hijacker to state on tape that he indeed was the chief hijacker of the Jordanian aircraft. This is something Justice Department wanted very much. The good news was that the target, the hijacker, was on Cyprus on schedule. But the bad news was that we had learned that the Cypriot police were looking for him because somehow he had gotten on a watch list of undesirables.
Our neighbor was running around Cyprus with a warrant on him.
Operatives cannot afford to have local police arrest the hijacker in the middle of the operation. The CIA decides to have the informant move himself and the hijacker into the same hotel where they have the command center set up.
I felt we could take that risk because it was a weekend. And it was unlikely that the police would energize themselves to run around, particularly to a high-class hotel and a new one at that, searching for this fella.
On Sunday morning, the informant tells the hijacker it's time to meet Joseph. He explains that since the drug dealer can't come to Cyprus, they need to meet him aboard his yacht. The informant's brother will take them to him in his boat.
We had to have, quote, American eyes, U.S. eyes on the target, on the hijacker, when he boarded the boat to be able to tell Washington with absolute certainty that it was the target who was boarding the boat. And so one of our officers was located on the pier.
Special Agent Tom Hansen.
The boat departed with the cooperating witness and the main subject on time and headed out towards the yacht.
Copy that. They're away.
We informed everybody on the communications net of that fact and that the operation was underway. We asked for Washington to begin to implement the extraction of his relatives, near relatives, sisters, brothers, and children from various places around the Middle East, which had been part of the deal.
Yeah. All right.
We had a picket boat system in place to act as guideposts for the cooperating witness to navigate from.
FBI's hostage rescue team commander, Special Agent Woody Johnson.
My job is to worry about the people that are working for me, and it's the concern if this is a double cross. Have they set us up? Is he, going along with this thing, but they're sitting in a boat somewhere waiting on us, and then they're going to come charging in on us on the yacht, and we're going to end up in a fight on the water.
For now, all the FBI can do is wait. Undercover FBI agents await the arrival of the Royal Jordanian air hijacker in international waters 12 miles off the coast of Cyprus. FBI's hostage rescue team commander, Special Agent Woody Johnson.
We pre-positioned the HRT guys on the deck, openly there with the appearance that we're bodyguards for the drug dealer.
Get that fender ready to go over.
Also on deck are 2 female FBI agents to act as diversions and help put the hijacker at ease.
The rest of us were secreted in the down below deck with a sniper in the pilot house in the event somebody shows up that we didn't expect. Or if these guys suddenly jump up and have got weapons and start shooting, we can defend ourselves.
Special Agent Don Glasser.
Everything looked normal on our boat. The female agents were waving to him, beckoning him to come aboard the boat.
I keep thinking this seems to be too easy. Is this guy, have they set us up?
The undercover agent spoke to them in Arabic, told them that the boss was down below in the boat taking a shower and be up shortly. We said, well, the owner's going to want him to be searched for weapons. It would only take a second. We apologized for that, but that was business. And he didn't resist that. So the other agent patted him down, gave him a quick pat down for weapons, didn't find anything on him.
Clean. Go downstairs.
The other agent escorted him back to the cockpit area where he nodded to me, which was the signal that we'd execute the arrest. The HRT operators came up from the cabin. He was very surprised. I'm not sure who he thought we were. He was absolutely terrified. Did not resist us. We put leg irons on him and we called the ship.
Agents send word of the successful arrest.
All right. We're out of here.
At that point, we knew that, we'd done what we were supposed to do, deliver the target to the Bureau, and so we closed down the command post very rapidly, checked out of the hotel.
As soon as the arrest was made, we launched a boat from the Butte.
Butte is 900-foot ship, so we're talking big. Comes up over the horizon, and we came up alongside of it. And the captain was playing patriotic music over the loudspeaker. You could hear it. And he was flying a huge American flag off the back of it. At that point, he's telling the crew what's going on. He said, we finally were striking back, and you had the opportunity to be a part of it. I'll tell you one of the things that was really a thrill and actually kind of choked me up is when we came up on the deck. There were probably 200-300 of the crew were up on the deck, and they were cheering and clapping. And it just really was kind of an emotional experience.
The Butte immediately headed west in the Mediterranean to link up with the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga.
Agents interview the hijacker aboard the Butte.
The debriefing of the terrorist was very helpful to the U.S. Intelligence community and getting an overall appreciation and understanding of the dynamics of circumstances in South Lebanon, the relationship between the Amal and the Hezbollah and the Lebanese government, and also the involvement of both Syria and Iran in that area.
We transported him to the Saratoga aboard military helicopter.
From there, FBI agents transfer the hijacker to an S-3 Viking for the long trip to the United States.
During its trip back to Washington, D.C., it had to perform 2 in-air refuelings. Once the flight was completed, it represented the longest continuous flight from the deck of a U.S. carrier that the military had ever performed.
After a 13-hour flight, the S-3 lands at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. The Flight 402 hijacker is immediately taken to Washington, D.C. for arraignment. In 1989, the hijacker is tried, convicted, and sentenced to 30 years in prison for conspiracy, air piracy, and hostage-taking.
The arrest and prosecution was the first instance of U.S. law bringing an individual into custody overseas, bringing him to the United States and prosecuting him in federal court for a crime in which neither he nor the victim nor the act or circumstance ever touched U.S. territory. It was our hope that by carrying out such an audacious act that we would send a very strong signal to the terrorists that the game had changed, that we would no longer be essentially passive, but we'd be proactive in pursuing them across the entire world if necessary.
Operation Goldenrod was the first success of its kind in the U.S. government's new war on terrorism. A small town in Nevada faces disaster. A holiday weekend, 250,000 tourists, and a 1,000-pound bomb that could explode at any second. The device cannot be disarmed. It cannot be moved without detonating.
Here we have the all clear. Stand by for
For the
countdown.
FBI, it's a worst-case scenario.
In 1980, the FBI faced the largest explosive device they had ever seen. The bomb was sophisticated, carefully constructed, and designed to destroy an entire building. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents and bomb experts responded from all over the country. Their mission, to disarm the deadly device and stop the dangerous extortionists who built it.
State Line, Nevada is a small tourist town straddling the border with California. The town has just 1,300 residents. The largest industry is gambling. With all that cash lying around, it makes an appealing target for criminals looking to make a big score. August 26, 1980, 5:30 a.m. at the receiving entrance of Harvey's Casino. Two men tell security they're delivering a new copy machine. The security guard gives them directions to the executive offices on the second floor. He has no idea what he has let in the building. This is no copier. Shortly after 6 a.m., a security guard making rounds notices something unusual. The door to the executive office is jammed. It looks like the lock has been glued shut. He manages to get the door open. The guard notices a bizarre-looking metal box in the middle of the room. On the floor, he finds a letter. According to the letter, the metal box contains a massive bomb. The guard contacts the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. Captain Ron Perini.
It was about 6:30 in the morning, and I received a call from one of my sergeants who told me that they had found a device at Harvey's Casino.
Perini calls in the Tahoe Douglas bomb squad. The device is huge and made of metal. According to the letter, it contains 1,000 pounds of TNT. That much TNT could blow up everything within 500 feet of the casino. The letter also says the bomb has 3 separate timers, each set for different explosion times. The device cannot be moved. It cannot be disarmed. Unless authorities come up with $3 million in cash, the bomber threatens to blow up Harvey's casino. He also threatens that if the FBI thwarts this plan, then the bomber will strike the same hotel again.
Yeah, this thing was big, and if it was real, and it did go off at that time, none of us would be alive.
The complexity of the design and amount of TNT tells law enforcement this bomber means business. This device could blow up the entire block, and the police don't even know when it is set to go off. The bomber is holding all the cards.
There was no indication from the bomb squad members that this was a false bomb, that it was just a shell. They felt it was very real. So there was a lot of issues going on at one time. How are we going to secure this? How are we going to provide the safety for everyone?
The casino is packed with gamblers. The hotel is full of guests. With a bomb that size, police have to get the hundreds of innocent people to safety. Over the next several hours, 600 hotel guests are moved to a nearby high school.
And it's scary, to tell you the truth. It's very scary. If this bomb would have gone off in that casino, we would have lost 600 people.
As the guests are being evacuated, Captain Perini assesses the situation and determines he needs help.
We're a relatively small department. We certainly don't have the expertise as some agencies may have in dealing with extortions, and the resources and the money and all the things that go with that to do a proper investigation. So because it was an extortion, we called the FBI immediately.
Special Agent Bill Junkie.
We typically have extortion attempts at the casino, the state line. We've had those before. We've had plenty of small bombs placed here and there in various casinos.
At this time, the FBI was receiving nearly 100 extortion threats a year against casinos, but they were seldom this serious.
But I never, in my wildest dreams, envisioned a bomb of this size and this complexity.
There are 28 toggle switches on the top box. Each one is numbered.
They were all in the same position, in a downward position, except for one toggle switch, which was numbered 23. That was in the up position. We didn't know when we looked at those toggle switches, of course, what they went to, what they were for.
Any one of the switches could deactivate the bomb or detonate it.
They gave me a letter which turned out to be an extortion letter. It identified various components of that bomb, and reading that letter I realized we had a big problem here. The letter indicated to us that there was 1,000 pounds of TNT in this bomb, and judging from the size of the large box, I think it was pretty consistent that 1,000 pounds of TNT could fit into that larger box.
1,000 pounds of TNT has a huge blast radius, enough to destroy more than one casino. That would devastate this small town.
We blocked off the casino corridor area on US 50, made sure no vehicles could go through. We told the other casinos to vacate the immediate area near Harvey's, and they did that. They even boarded up some of the windows to make sure that if there was an explosion, that would cause the glass to break and hurt others.
As the sheriff's department closes down the streets, the bomb squad works on the device. The crew does not wear their bulky bomb suits because nothing could protect them if a bomb this size detonated. First, they want to know exactly what's inside the metal casing.
What kind of bomb is it? How big of an explosion is it going to be? Is it going to affect the businesses across the street? Or how far will it go? Is there chemicals involved? Is there even nuclear stuff?
Herb Hawkins is the assistant special agent in charge at the FBI's Las Vegas field office.
Well, the device was x-rayed in parts because no x-ray machine was that big. So about a third of the device was x-rayed, then another third, then another third.
In all, the bomb squad takes over 200 x-rays. They also photograph the device and dust for fingerprints. getting paint samples is much riskier. But for the FBI, it could be an important clue to identifying the bomber.
Ultimately, we may find a guy who's got that kind of paint in his garage.
Investigators also find a small drop of blood on one corner of the device. It is collected as potential evidence.
We may be able to find a guy whose blood matches that which was taken off the bomb. That's a good investigative lead for us.
The latent fingerprints, paint, and blood samples are sent to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. In the lab, technicians will analyze the evidence in the hopes it will lead them to the bomber. But for the agents on the scene, the first priority is to disarm this bomb. In the command post, investigators study the X-rays of the device.
The bottom 3/4 of this lower box was very high density. The X-rays couldn't penetrate it. That told us, in essence, that it was explosive in there, or some kind of material in there filling that bottom box. We could see wires from the top box going into that material in the bottom box. We presume those were wires from the detonators, from the blasting caps, into that explosive material.
Scientists from NEST, the Nuclear Emergency Search Team, analyzed the bottom portion of the bomb to calculate the potential blast radius.
They estimated that we were looking at about a 1,500 to 2,500 foot blast area where damage could be somewhat significant. And of course, inside of 800 yards, we're looking at more than severe damage, and of course, total destruction within 200-meter radius.
We realized this guy knew what he was doing, that it was going to be an extremely difficult bomb to defeat, if it could be defeated at all.
Agents are in an impossible position, but they must find a way to disarm this bomb, and fast, before anyone gets hurt. In State Line, Nevada, extortionists plant a massive bomb in a crowded casino. The bombers demand $3 million, or they will detonate the device. Within hours of the discovery of the bomb, investigators from all over the area arrive in State Line. Sheriffs from Douglas County, police from South Lake Tahoe, as well as El Dorado County. Special Agent Bill Jonke.
They started just flooding in because they knew we would have a lot of work to do. We began bringing in FBI agents from surrounding districts almost immediately.
As bomb experts work on the device, agents go after the extortionists.
We needed every patron in that casino to be interviewed with the chance that maybe they had seen something, a vehicle being involved in the delivery of this bomb, something.
Authorities set up toll-free hotlines. Captain Ron Perini and the Douglas County Sheriff's Department work closely with the FBI.
We want to know if there's any witnesses, if anybody saw these people bring the device into the casino. What about vehicles, descriptions?
The FBI questions the security guard. He tells them about seeing two men delivering a copy machine around 5:30 a.m. They were driving a white van.
We knew that we may have a white van involved in this. We knew by then exactly what time that bomb came through the casino. We knew we had two people pushing and pulling that device.
Investigators try to locate all the white vans in the Lake Tahoe area.
Law enforcement officers were stopping these vans and finding out who the operators were.
While agents on the street search for possible suspects, technicians continue to analyze the device. But the news is not good. This bomb is formidable.
On that first day after the diagnostic work, the X-rays, the interpretation of that extortion letter, we realized that we weren't going to move that bomb. That we, in fact, had a viable, functioning, live explosive device. We didn't know what the explosive inside was. We also figured we had explosives in that top box that made any sort of render-safe procedure extremely, extremely difficult. By late afternoon, we decided that We were not going to penetrate this bomb with any equipment that we had or that was developed anywhere in the country.
It appears the bomber has won. The FBI must take a new approach. They are going to have to cooperate. That evening, agents meet with Harvey Gross, the owner of Harvey's Casino.
We thought we might have a very good opportunity to arrest, to identify the people involved in this crime through the delivery of the money. So we wanted to comply with the instructions.
The bomber wants $3 million delivered to a remote location via helicopter. In exchange, authorities will receive instructions on how to move the bomb and detonate it safely.
We told them the problems we were having with this bomb, and we had a window there that was closing as far as getting the money together or deciding what we were going to do.
Agents feel that $3 million in cash is the fastest way to find him. The casino owner is skeptical.
And he said to us, "What are you going to try and do with this person?" And we said, "We are going to try and catch him." And he said, "Well, if you're going to do that, I'm not giving him $3 million. So he gave us $5,000, which we appropriately marked, and the rest was cut up paper.
An FBI pilot will fly the helicopter. Since the bomber has forbidden any radio contact, the pilot will wear a wire. He must land at a designated spot at South Lake Tahoe Airport no later than 11 p.m. At 12:05, he will receive further instructions.
He specified that no law enforcement be involved in this operation whatsoever. Well, that was pretty unrealistic. We, of course, had numerous law enforcement people stationed and concealed throughout that airport in an effort to identify anyone that could be seen near that airport that might be linked to this extortion attempt.
The pilot lands at South Lake Tahoe Airport at exactly 11 o'clock. In a nearby building, a team of FBI agents and police monitor the pilot's wire.
We were waiting for contact from the bomber. And at 12:05, just as he said, the telephone rang in the telephone booth.
Okay.
The caller instructs the pilot to look under the shelf of the phone booth. There he will find further instructions.
Follow Highway 50 to the west, the right-hand side in a straight line.
He read that note aloud as he stood there outside the phone booth. That allowed us to hear and to know what that letter contained, and we immediately dispatched ground units in the direction that he was told to fly.
The pilot is instructed to fly west along Highway 50 at an altitude of 500 feet. At some point, he will see a strobe light where he is to land.
Not much altitude in the mountains like that. Very, very low, very, very hazardous for a helicopter to be that low at midnight. We were going to do the best we could to provide ground coverage for the protection of our pilot, and also obviously to arrest, to apprehend this perpetrator if that was at all possible. So immediately we had cars traveling westbound on Highway 50 for the sole purpose of either one, encountering the subject or the suspect in this case, or two, ensuring the safety of our pilot.
A SWAT team flying 1,000 feet above the FBI helicopter will provide added security.
The thing that always makes you more apprehensive is the unknown. We didn't know who you were dealing with. We didn't know if we had 10 people, one person, 2 dozen that were going to meet that airplane.
The FBI pilot flies west, following Route 50. He maintains an altitude of exactly 500 feet as he searches for the strobe light.
That wire, please. I just fought.
There is nothing but darkness below. It seems the bomber is playing some sort of deadly game, and the FBI is at his mercy. State Line, Nevada, 1980. An FBI helicopter searches a 15-mile stretch of Highway 50 for a signal from below. The extortionist who planted a massive bomb in a local casino has demanded $3 million. Agents know that appearing to comply is their best hope for arresting the bomb maker. The pilot flies through the mountains in the dark at an altitude of only 500 feet. He sees no signal from below. Assistant Special Agent in Charge Herb Hawkins controls the search operation from the ground.
He came back, he flew it again. And he flew it again. We kept sending him back down the route. Then after he got through with his 15 miles, we put him at 250, 300 feet, which he was scared to death. This was an experienced Marine helicopter pilot who joined the FBI. And he's flying treetops, trying to comply with and make this successful. And he keeps calling me, Herb, I got nothing. I have nothing. Everything's quiet, you know. And so I said, okay. Then at 4 o'clock, we brought him back.
Stand by.
It seems the bomber has won again. All the FBI's attempts to establish contact with him have failed. If he doesn't want the money, what does he want? Agents turn to their only other lead, the airport telephone booth where the bomber left instructions for the pilot. Special Agent Bill Jonke.
We, of course, examined that telephone booth for latent fingerprints, and we interviewed a few people, but we basically came up with nothing. Nobody had seen anything at that airport that was suspicious in nature. So that was a dead end. We had not established contact with the extortionist. And that was of grave concern to us because we needed more communication.
The next morning, the FBI asks Governor Robert List of Nevada to hold a press conference. He needs to convince the bomber to reestablish contact.
This request is made due to a failure of enlightenment and a confusion in following the previous directions. The hotel is prepared to comply and is standing by as before.
We had basically silence on Wednesday. I think that the people were too cautious to make another contact.
For the Tahoe Douglas bomb squad, it's a potentially deadly dilemma. How can they move the bomb without knowing what's inside?
It was very heavy. It was made of steel, and it was loaded with up to 1,000 pounds of explosive. We couldn't just pick it up and carry it out of it. We realized to even move it, even if we had a safe way to move, would require 3 to 4 people. That's way too many to have anywhere near a device that could explode.
Even if they can move the device to the parking lot, then what?
We, in essence, have a giant hand grenade here. If it exploded, it would send steel shrapnel all over the place. We really couldn't afford to have it outside.
Agents and bomb experts do not know if the massive bomb is set on a timer, if the extortionist can set the bomb off remotely, or exactly how volatile the explosive material inside is. They have some hard decisions to make. One member of the team makes a radical suggestion.
Our experts told us, and we all agreed, that if we could explosively separate this top box, knock it off the bottom box at a very, very fast speed with explosives, we could defeat the electrical current from the battery that was being generated and maybe avoid a detonation of the main charge.
The plan is to use 6 pounds of plastic explosives to destroy the top box. In essence, the bomb's brain.
If they could sever that pulse from actually going down to the dynamite, it may not go off.
Everything depends on whether or not the top box is also rigged with explosives.
If the top box contained dynamite, then our explosive separation would fail because, in essence, the bomb would, what we call, sympathetically detonate. In other words, the explosion from our attempt to remove the top box would detonate all the explosives in the bomb.
It's a risky procedure. The entire casino could be destroyed. They need permission from hotel owner Harvey Gross.
And what he did say was, as long as nobody gets hurt, we can't keep doing what we're doing. We're going on for hours and hours and hours, and nobody can come up with a solution other than that, then that's okay. There was tears in his eyes, and he basically was giving us a directive that you take care of everyone here. Make sure nobody's harmed. I don't want anybody hurt. If the device does go off and it destroys a casino, we can rebuild it.
The bomb squad sets up a linear-shaped charge, positioning the explosives to destroy the top box.
Wires were run from the explosive charge to a window outside and eventually to a firing point out in the parking lot.
There is no way to know whether the shaped charge will successfully disable the bomb or detonate it.
We hoped that we would separate that top box and that there were in fact no explosives in there and we'd have no detonation. But we were fully prepared, and I have to say we expected detonation of up to 1,000 pounds of TNT, as the letter had indicated. So we were prepared for that when we fired that shaped charge.
At 3:55 p.m., Sheriff Jerry Maple broadcasts a warning. The disarming attempt is about to begin.
Okay, we have the all clear. Everybody stand by. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In a casino in Nevada, FBI agents face the biggest bomb they've ever seen. A device packed with 1,000 pounds of explosives. Their only option, blow the control box off the top of the bomb with a small explosive charge.
All units stand by for countdown, please.
Special Agent Bill Jonke watches from the roof of a nearby casino.
We had high-speed cameras prepared for the detonation. We were watching. We were keeping our fingers crossed. We, of course, could hear over the radio literally the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The plan has failed. Part of the casino has been reduced to rubble. Assistant Special Agent in Charge Herb Hawkins.
We had a major mess on our hands. We had a hotel that had been blown downward 2 stories, blown upward 2 stories. Numerous pieces of device, rebar, concrete, chips, wall, desks, furniture, all mashed up, and in some of it in the hotel, down in the hole, some of it up on the 2nd and 3rd floor, and a bunch of it out in the parking lot.
All of us probably had the same thought. We were thankful that we had not a single person with as much as a scratch. Nobody was hurt. We felt relief that the bomb, in essence, was gone. There was not a danger from that bomb anymore. Having to go back up on it for a day or two was getting stressful for everybody. So we felt a relief when that thing went off. If you destroy or damage a building, that can be rebuilt. But loss of human life or casualties is something that can never be healed. Myself and a few of the bomb technicians went into that building right away, right after detonation. However, it was pretty dangerous.
Rubble is everywhere, and the FBI is concerned the rest of the building might collapse. Once it is secured, agents go back into the casino to search for clues.
We commenced a very thorough crime scene investigation, as you would have to do in a bombing case, as your crime scene is really the key to helping you solve the puzzle.
But in this devastation, finding those clues will not be easy.
When a bomb goes off, the components just don't evaporate. They become much smaller, and obviously disfigured, but they're there. They're there in the rubble. They're there in the crater at the bottom. They're there. Our job is to find them and identify them as components of the bomb.
Authorities estimate it could take nearly 6 weeks to process the crime scene. The FBI can't afford to give the bomber that much time to cover his tracks. Within days of the explosion, the state-line casinos offer a $250,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of the extortionists.
We hit every news media outlet with that information in hopes of somebody calling. We generated and started a hotline, a 1-800 hotline, so that anybody in the country could call us toll-free and provide information for this reward.
The offer of a large reward brings thousands of leads, but no solid information.
Several days went by, I'd say 7, 8, 9, 10 days, and we got leads from this offer, but we didn't get what we considered to be viable leads from this. The group that was responsible for building and placing this bomb was probably very close-knit, maybe even a family, because we weren't getting any information.
Agents hope that in the rubble they will find one piece of evidence that will lead them to the bomber.
At the end of the 40 days, we'd recovered approximately 108 pounds of a bomb that we felt probably weighed around 800 pounds. So we recovered about an eighth of it. The items that we recovered primarily were heavy steel items that survived the blast.
As each piece of the bomb is recovered, it is shipped to the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C. This is the first opportunity the agents have to really study the bomb.
We were able to determine the type of switches that were used, the mercury switches, the type of explosive, pieces of cardboard box, things that would point where and how the device was constructed.
Laboratory analysis tells agents a lot about the bomb and something about the bomber.
One of the early things that we did was have the metallurgist look at the bomb components we were recovering and determine the stresses on those pieces of metal from a metallurgical point of view to tell us what forces were exerted against them in the blast. And by doing that, we could put a family of explosives into this. And while the threat letter said it was TNT, we're not about to take that on face value. We want to know that the damage was consistent with an explosive like TNT, which it was not. So right away we know something about the bomber. He didn't tell the truth in the letter. He was trying to tell us something that would get your attention.
The bomber used dynamite instead of TNT. Because TNT is more powerful, he probably mentioned it to intimidate investigators.
It was a very complex scheme, and therefore, when you looked at the device, a complex mind had to have put this together. A very painstaking, patient individual. This was not built in a day. This was a device that looked like it had taken weeks, if not months, to build. And to build it without drawing attention probably required even more time.
To try and learn more about the bomber, agents asked for assistance from FBI profilers at the Behavioral Science Unit then housed at the FBI complex at Quantico. Profilers determined the bomber is probably a male, in his late 30s or early 40s, with some sort of bomb-making experience. Based on the complexity of the device and the letter, they feel the bomber is egocentric. He believes he can outsmart investigators.
Hawkins? And the bombing profile is extremely difficult. It's not like a murder where the guy leaves certain fingerprints at the scene. Bombing is a lot more complex. Personal, when you shoot somebody, it's more impersonal when you build a bomb and you put it under his car and turn around and walk away. You don't have to sit there and watch.
He doesn't like to get close to his victims. The agents also suspect something other than money motivates this bomber.
Is this a terrorist act? And what's the goal of this particular act? Is it to just make money? Are these people involved with narcotics and drugs? Do we have organized crime, the mafia? We did not believe that organized crime would try and pull this type of thing. We didn't think the druggers would try and pull this type of thing. They like to remain off the skyline.
Investigators are running out of leads, and the bombers seem poised to strike again. In Reno, 40 miles north, 4 more casinos received bomb threats. In State Line, Nevada, the FBI searches for a dangerous extortionist. He's already blown up 1 casino, and in his extortion note, he threatened to do it again. The FBI fears the bomber is simply toying with them. In Reno, 40 miles north, 4 more casinos received bomb threats. Investigators search the casinos, but no bombs are found. Further investigation reveals these threats aren't connected to the Harvey's bombing. Agents again appeal to the public for help. They distribute descriptions of the suspects based on the security guards' recollections. Assistant Special Agent in Charge Herb Hawkins.
We were bombarded with thousands upon thousands of phone calls.
In early September, agents receive an intriguing tip. 3 former employees of a jet aircraft plant moved to Reno just before the casino bombing. According to the FBI lab in Washington, some of the electronic components used in the bomb resemble aircraft parts. Aircraft engineers could have the technical savvy to put together a device like this. Special Agent Bill Junkie.
They fit our profile, if you will, of being a group. They had access, they had experience in explosive work. They looked pretty darn good. And we spent a lot of investigative man-hours looking into these people and covering the leads from this group that extended nationwide. We focused on this group with a lot of our resources for 2 to 3 weeks before we were finally able to eliminate them as suspects.
It's one of many dead ends, and the bomber has gone strangely silent. Desperate for leads, investigators review every phone tip they have received since the bombing. Assistant Special Agent in Charge Herb Hawkins wades through thousands of memos. On October 1st, a small tip catches his eye. A motel owner saw a white van leaving her motel in South Lake Tahoe an hour before the bomb was delivered. From witness statements, the FBI knows that the bomb was delivered in a white van. Hawkins thinks it's too close to be a coincidence.
When I picked that memo up, first it came in on the 800 line and no one looked at it. It's now a month old. And a suspicious vehicle leaving at 4:30 in the morning in a van needs to be covered.
Agents interview the motel owner who called in the tip. On August 26th at 4 a.m., she heard strange noises in the parking lot of the motel.
She awoke and went to a window and saw 2 to 3 individuals in white overalls trying to start a white van. She copied down the license number to ensure that it was the same license number on the registration card.
The next day, she called the FBI hotline. Agents learn the name on the hotel registration card is fake. They run the license plate number of the white van through the California Department of Motor Vehicles.
The information that came back from the DMV check on that license plate was that the vehicle was registered to a Mr. John Burgess, who was a resident of Clovis, California, which is right down by Fresno. Immediately, agents in the Fresno office went to pay a visit to Mr. Burgess and see why that van of his was up at Lake Tahoe and was being occupied by 3 people who appeared to be suspicious.
Burgess tells agents he doesn't know what they're talking about. He owns a white van, but his son usually drives it.
We were unable to gather very much information from Mr. Burgess other than the fact that his son had the vehicle and that his son might be involved in growing marijuana.
Agents interview Burgess's son in Fresno.
You were in Tahoe.
They ask him what he was doing in Tahoe at 4 o'clock in the morning and why he used a fake name on his registration.
The young man told the investigators that he was up at Lake Tahoe looking for a place to grow marijuana. These agents realized that Lake Tahoe is at an elevation of 6,200 feet plus. It is not conducive whatsoever to growing marijuana because of the climatic conditions. So that was a pretty lame excuse.
Agents suspect Burgess's son is lying, but they don't know why. They don't think he's the bomber. At 18, they feel he's too young to construct a bomb this complex. Agents move on, searching for more viable leads.
The investigation into this bombing wore on and on and on. We interviewed well over 400 people, suspects in this bombing, throughout the country.
The bomb caused $3 million in damage. The people behind this must be stopped before they build another bomb. But agents are running out of leads. They have not heard from the bomber in months. By November, all but 16 agents are called home. The investigation is stalling. The FBI tries a new approach.
In the early part of 1981, we decided that we needed to up the ante for the reward. The reward was then increased to $500,000, from $250,000 to $500,000.
If a tight-knit group is responsible for the casino bombing, the FBI is betting that $500,000 in cash should be enough money to tear it apart.
We got our $500,000, and we got the news media, asked them to put this out. We had a small news conference, and it was prolific.
The FBI's gamble pays off.
And it wasn't but a very short time, maybe a few days, that our phone call came in. A young man called the Fresno office of the FBI and told them that we had been close, but we weren't on the right guy. He told us that it was not the young son of Mr. Burgess that we should be looking at, that it was in fact John Burgess Sr. himself who was responsible for this.
The tip makes sense. Although John Burgess didn't appear to be a likely suspect, agents have never resolved why his son was in the Tahoe area when the bomb was delivered. Within days, the entire investigation is moved from State Line, Nevada to Fresno, California.
There was already a resident agency there, but we established another office there, and we brought in another 30, 40 agents to Fresno to begin our focus on John Burgess. I personally believed that this was our guy. There was a family situation involved. He had two sons who could have helped him and would not have participated in the reward. They would have kept their mouths shut like we expected. And I moved down to Fresno with great anticipation. I thought, this is it.
The FBI suspects John Burgess Sr. is the casino bomber, but they still need evidence linking him to the crime before they can make an arrest. A major casino lies in ruins, decimated by a massive bomb. The FBI suspects that John Burgess, a Fresno landscaping contractor, is the mastermind behind the devastating bomb. Special Agent Bill Jonke.
Our investigation of John Burgess Sr. included everything we can think of. We talked and interviewed his relatives, his friends. We surveilled him day and night. We checked his background. We checked people who had worked for him.
Burgess has an interesting past, according to Special Agent Herb Hawkins.
He was a Hungarian immigrant who had run afoul of the Soviets during the Hungarian Revolution. He went to a slave labor camp, exiled by the Soviets to that area, and had a great amount of work with explosives.
Through interviews, agents learn that Burgess is in financial trouble. In March 1980, The IRS filed suit against him for $34,000 in back taxes. He also owes Harvey's casino $15,000 in unpaid gambling markers.
His gaming losses that he told us about and that we had verified through records beforehand only led to make him a stronger suspect, because we always felt that whoever did this had a grudge against Harvey's casino, probably owed him money or had lost money, so it really fit perfectly into our bomber profile.
Agents feel John Burgess has the skill and the motive to bomb Harvey's casino. Now they need to prove it.
Myself and another agent were assigned to contact Mr. Burgess every single day, 7 days a week. Just pay a visit to him and talk to him, get him to talk. Some days he'd yell and scream at us and wouldn't let us in. Other days he'd let us in and talk to us.
Burgess is very egotistical. He likes to talk about his successful landscaping business and his skill in electronics. The profilers were correct.
Things started to fall into place in terms of background. Now we needed to find out, there in Fresno, did he build a device there, and where did he buy the stuff to do this?
You have bombing, one of the first things you do is you start looking around for thefts. Where could this stuff have come from? They could make it themselves, they could import it, they could steal it, they could buy it. You go to the ATF and pull all the theft reports.
Agents learned that 1,000 pounds of dynamite was stolen from a construction site near Burgess's home prior to the casino bombing.
So the puzzle started to come together, and it was time that we got people to start talking to us from inside the family.
Agents interview a member of Burgess's extended family who owns a large turkey farm near Fresno. They're particularly interested in the switches on a feeding mechanism Burgess constructed for the farm.
It was identical to the construction of the bomb. It was the same type of plastic material that he used, the same kind of soldering that he used.
Agents turn up the pressure on Burgess's sons and finally persuade them to talk.
Both kids in general told us the same story, that initially their father had asked them to participate in this extortion attempt. Both kids were not anxious to do it. They didn't want to do it, but they had loyalty to their father. And they, at times, provided some labor.
Burgess's son admits he did not grow marijuana. He made up the story to protect his father. The FBI learns that 2 employees in Burgess's landscaping business were the men who delivered the bomb to Harvey's casino. Burgess's sons say their father's girlfriend helped write the extortion letter. And they lead authorities to the place where their father hid the remainder of the stolen dynamite.
They also provided us with information about an additional explosives theft that occurred at basically the same site. And they told us where this explosive was buried. 600 pounds worth of dynamite was buried in a dry creek bed outside of Fresno. Mr. Burgess had told the boys he planned to build another bomb and put it somewhere else.
On August 16, 1981, John Burgess is arrested as he tries to leave his home. Burgess and his co-conspirators are charged with commercial extortion and conspiracy. Burgess's sons plead guilty to conspiracy and are sentenced to probation. On April 15, 1985, John Burgess is convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The FBI lost a building, but the operation was a success. No one lost their lives, and the FBI captured the bomber before he could strike again.
So we learned a lot about processing large building bombing. What you have to do first, second, and third, where the pitfalls are, where the dangers are. Now, unfortunately, since then, all around the globe, we've had opportunities to practice the lessons and refine the lessons that we learned there.